Welcome to Woman Crush Winesday, a series where I drink wine and talk about women I like. It's International Women's Day, and your choice for representing international women, at least in this series, is one of the most famous artists of the 20th century, Frida Kahlo. She falls into several intersections within feminist theory, so I ain't mad. Magdalena Carmen Frida Kahlo y Calderón was born on July 6, 1907 in Coyoacan, Mexico. Her father was a German Jew and a photographer who taught Frida about art from a young age. Her mother was a Mexican Catholic, and she and Frida frequently butted heads because her mother was like real Catholic. At 6 years old, Frida contracted polio. She was bedridden for 9 months, and when she recovered, one of her legs was thinner than the other. As a teen, she was sent to a vocational school for teachers, but was pulled out of the program when she engaged in a relationship with one of her teachers, Sarah Zanil. At 15, Frida started at the elite National Preparatory School, where she was one of only 15 girls studying. She really loved classes like biology and anatomy, which may have played a huge role in her paintings later in life. She excelled in her classes, read voraciously, and increasingly became interested in traditional Mexican culture and political and social justice issues. This is where she first met Diego Rivera, who was 21 years her senior. He was painting a mural for the school, and she would flirt with him by playing mostly harmless pranks on him. In September of 1925, at 18 years old, Frida and her boyfriend, fellow political activist Alejandro Gomez Areas, were in a fatal traffic accident. Both survived, but Frida sustained serious injuries. A metal pole went through her body, breaking her spinal column in 3 places, her collarbone, her pelvis, and some of her ribs. Her right leg, which was the one that had been affected by polio, was broken in 11 places, and her right foot had been dislocated. She spent 1 month in the hospital and 2 months bedridden at home. Because she couldn't return to school, she started painting self-portraits. When Frida recovered, she sparked a friendship with Italian photographer Tina Madati, who introduced her to the Communist Party. She reconvened with Rivera, a fellow communist, in 1928 at a party thrown by Madati. Frida was 21, Diego was 42, but that didn't matter to them. He came to court her at her family's home, Casa Azul, under the guise of critiquing her art. Rivera really believed in her art. He wasn't just there to get some. He really thought that she was the future of Mexican art, and I mean, he wasn't wrong. Her friends didn't like him because he was older and not so conventionally attractive, and he was known for his divorces and his womanizing habits. They were concerned that Frida was getting it in with the wrong kind of partner, but she was not a delicate flower. She liked cursing, dirty jokes, gossip, parties, drinking, and generally just being rowdy, I suppose. Frida's father warned Rivera that he was marrying a devil, to which he responded, "I know." They were married on August 21st, 1929. Not only was Rivera a communist, but he was also involved in the Mexicanidad movement, which praised everything authentically and traditionally Mexican over Eurocentric societal standards. Frida embraced the movement as well and stopped shaving her legs and plucking her eyebrows, and instead started wearing traditional bright Mexican garb and took fierce pride in her heritage. Since Rivera worked on commission as an artist, they traveled quite a bit. However, the both of them had to leave the Communist Party in order to be admitted into other countries. They lived in San Diego in 1930, where Frida debuted her painting, Frida and Diego Rivera, at the 6th annual exhibition of the San Diego Society of Women Artists. And then they went on to Detroit. Frida felt increasingly lonely and isolated. She also did not care for American culture and Americans, especially rich capitalists like the Fords. She had a failed abortion and subsequent miscarriage in Detroit, which caused hemorrhaging, which then became the subject of some of Frida's most famous paintings. After controversy followed a commission mural by Rivera, they returned to Mexico. They lived in separate but adjoined homes and had their own studios in those homes, and they committed infidelity, like all the time. Both of them. Famously, Frida had relationships with both men and women, including American artist Isamu Noguchi. What hurt Frida the most, however, was Rivera's relationship with her sister Cristina, which is just not a thing you do. It's not a line that you cross, you asshat. Between 1934 and 35, Frida barely painted anything because she underwent multiple surgeries, had a few abortions, and amputations. However, by 1936, she and Rivera had reconciled, and they jointly petitioned the Mexican government to grant asylum to former Soviet leader Leon Trotsky and his wife, Natalia Sadova. They lived in Frida's childhood home, Casa Azul, for just over 2 years, and not only did Frida and Trotsky become very good friends, but also lovers. Because of course she did. It was also during this time that Frida had one of the most productive painting periods in her entire life. Though she was a little bit unsure of her work herself, she gained recognition through gallery exhibits and the sale of her art. 4 pieces of her art were sold for $200 a piece in 1937, which now amounts to about $13,000 in total. This is also when French surrealist André Breton fell in love with her work. He not only introduced Frida to the surrealist movement, but claimed that her art was surreal. Breton's support led to his friend art dealer Julien Levy showing Frida's work in her first solo exhibit in his gallery in Manhattan. Kahlo went to New York alone for the exhibit, becoming somewhat of a fashion icon with her bright Mexican garb. From New York, Frida sailed to Paris, where she was supposed to have an exhibition opening. But a lot of things went wrong, including Breton not getting her art through customs, and then he didn't even have a gallery to show her art in himself. Famed Cubist and Dada artist Marcel Duchamp was able to help by arranging for Frida's art to be shown elsewhere. However, the gallery refused to show all but 2 pieces of her art because they deemed it too gruesome, but Breton stepped in and insisted that they show her art among other pieces of Cuban and Mexican art and trinkets. The trinkets part she did not really care for. The exhibition was actually a financial failure because of the oncoming Second World War, which forced Frida to cancel an upcoming show in London. The good news is that the Louvre purchased the frame, which made Frida the first Mexican artist to be featured in their collection. She also struck up a friendship with Pablo Picasso and became somewhat of a fashion icon in Paris, even landing a spread in Vogue Paris. The bad news is that she didn't quite care for Paris or surrealists. When Frida returned to Mexico City, Rivera filed for divorce. Whether or not this had anything to do with their infidelities, nobody really knows, but they did remain close, and Frida actually continued to manage his finances and correspondence. After the split, Frida worked harder than ever, creating some of her most famous portraits, including 2 Fridas. Not even a full year after they divorced, they were both in San Francisco at the same time. They reconciled romantically and were remarried on December 8th, 1940, because their relationship wasn't dramatic enough already. Despite the recognition she gained independently, she was never financially successful. Her health continued to decline, but nevertheless, she persisted. She rejoined the Communist Party in 1948 and continued to be as politically active as her chronic pain would allow. However, her dependence on alcohol and painkillers started to affect her art in that her brushstrokes, usually clean and tidy, became rushed and frantic, and her use of color became less intentional. A friend of hers noticed how close to death Frida was and hastily arranged an exhibition for her work. Kahlo was too weak to attend and was told to stay in bed by her doctor, and so she did. She arrived in an ambulance and stayed in a bed in the gallery for the whole opening. Talk about nevertheless, she persisted. During her last few years, Kahlo had her right leg amputated because of gangrene, spent most of her time bedridden with bronchopneumonia, attempted suicide, was hospitalized multiple times, and still managed to make a final public appearance at a demonstration against the CIA's invasion of Cuba with Rivera on July 2nd, 1954. 11 days later, at approximately 6 a.m., Frida passed away at only 47 years old. Her paintings are so popular today because a lot of people can identify with her depiction of pain. Like I said earlier, she fits into multiple intersections in feminism, which is another reason why so many of us love her today. She was an artist, a woman of color who was proud of her heritage, a queer and sex-positive person, an independent and disabled person, and a fierce protector of civil and social rights. I did not hit on some of the very important things that happened in her life because just so much happened to her and because of her. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. In the comments below, let me know what your favorite thing about Frida Kahlo is or what I missed. And don't forget to take the poll in the cards to vote for next month's Woman Crush Winesday. If you're not already subscribed to The Princess and the Scrivener, please do so down below, especially if you would like to see more videos on Disney, intersectional feminism, pop culture critiques, Woman Crush Winesday, of course, and more. Sarah will probably see you next week.